Man, I'm just thinking about the days. Like I don't see it as frequently anymore, but between yourself and Pete Ferreira, just if I saw both of you on a comment thread, I knew I was in for a good time. I knew I was in for entertainment.
Dude, yeah, Pete's also calmed down on that stuff. But I think what COVID ended up doing was exposed a lot of people that I was, in inverted commas, friends with on Facebook that were complete morons. And, when I started weeding out people that were opposite to my views about the vaccine and calling this whole thing a 5G conspiracy theory and this and that, by the time I deleted all those people, I was left with a pretty sane bunch of human beings. So there's very minimal threads to jump on nowadays and actually attack someone's thought process. Also, I just don't have the energy. I think that's what COVID's just exposed me to is the people's dumbness knows of no bounds. So nothing actually surprises me anymore. So what's the point in even trying to intervene or say anything with logic? With logic.
No, I understand entirely. They have a similar feeling. I can't claim to be the smartest human being out there, but god damn it, I've been surprised how below the bar can actually be.
Yeah, dude, no one has to even claim to be the smartest, right? I mean, if you consider yourself just as a thought experiment, let's all pretend we're of average intelligence. That means that 50% of the population is dumber than you. So, I mean, God, it gets only worse from there if you think about it in that aspect. Because, I mean, yeah, no one is, unless you're super egotistical, going to consider themselves dramatically intelligent. I mean, we're all going to say, oh, yeah, I do pretty stupid things, therefore I'm probably average, right? But then there are people dumber than you, and you have to accept that as a fact. So, yeah, it's no wonder we have what we have and the cesspool of ideology we have. It's actually astounding.
No, it can be scary out there. So sometimes a platform for everyone to speak can end up being interesting.
Well, I think that's the biggest thing that's come with social media, right? Is yes, we did give everyone a platform, and we have all these things about freedom of speech, and you have to respect each other's opinions, and everyone's opinion's valid. And quite frankly, I'm beginning to not think so, dude. I don't think everyone's opinion is equally valid. I mean, I am not a meteorologist, so my opinion on what the weather's going to do tomorrow means absolutely jack shit. So why should someone that is not educated in a particular field have an equal opinion to someone who is? I'm sorry, this whole narrative has gone too far about, oh, let's treat everyone equally in terms of their opinion. No, your opinions aren't always equal.
No, I can understand. Put into that context, yes, it it makes complete sense. If someone who has studied it for years versus someone who has done a few Google searches is not the same thing. This conversation took a very deep dive very quickly.
It did. I thought you were going to ask me about photography, dude. I thought that's what this was about. No, we're starting off with idiots on the internet. So this is a glorious Saturday afternoon.
This took a turn very quickly. Let's wait. Introduce yourself and what it is you do.
Okay. So, in the context of the show, I'm a photographer for the South African music scene. I consider myself a hobbyist photographer or professional hobbyist because in my full-time job capacity, I work as an economist. So yeah, I'm what they refer to as a weekend warrior with a camera. I don't use a camera most often during the week, while a lot of other photographers do. And I think that's helped keep my passion for live concerts alive a lot more than I have seen a time that the number of photographers we have in the scene or the industry has dwindled. And I suppose that's also just a culmination of what happens when you mix your business and your pleasure, and eventually everything just starts looking like a job to you. So I'm fortunate in the sense that I don't have to mingle the two. So I can just do this for an enjoyment aspect still.
That's fantastic. How long have you been doing photography, and how long have you been involved in photographing the South African music scene?
So I think this year's 7 years now that I've been doing the photography thing. But yeah, I've been part of, let's say, documenting the music scene for quite a bit longer than that. Before I became a photographer, I was a music journalist for places like Music Review and a couple of other smaller websites that we developed over time. And in that time, I got to do some fantastic things. I got to interview a lot of the internationals that came out here, which was amazing. But then I realized that I was actually spending a lot of my time backstage anyway, or behind the pit barrier anyway. So it felt somewhat redundant that I wasn't shooting, even though I had the place to stand there and view the show the same as every other photographer did. So yeah, I went and bought a camera, and I was already friends with half the photographers because I mean we're all at shows doing different things. I was writing, they were photographing, whatever. So yeah, they all gave me a rudimentary crash course in what they thought was the most important. Henry Engelbrecht was the one that ended up mentoring me the most. Yeah, and here we find ourselves 7 years later, where I'm still doing it, still loving it, and surprisingly, it's been the busiest year for photography for me yet. I think post-COVID, everyone wants their show shot and they need content again. So it's actually been surprisingly good.
I'm glad to hear it. Like, I'm glad to hear that perspective of, when you said as we started that you've been busy, you've been photographing so many shows. It's good to hear that things are happening again in full force.
Yeah, dude, absolutely. And I mean, these are shows that I'm very fortunate that I'm actually getting paid for, So minus one or two here and there of smaller bands that are straight out the gate, and they don't have budgets. So, I mean, you can't do anything about that. But yeah, dude, in comparison to years gone by, it's a different attitude. And I think everyone was so desperate for shows that all shows that I've been to have been well attended. I think the marketing has been taken up a notch because people really want to back these venues out. I don't think the artists, I don't think the organizers, I don't think anyone wants to waste their time and half-ass anything anymore. It's either give it 110% or don't bother doing it. And I'm quite comfortable with that. I'm enjoying seeing 3-band lineups again. I'm enjoying seeing varied lineups again, which is the thing that before COVID I felt that had disappeared from the earlier years of the scene. And this is something I've discussed with a lot of the guys from different bands. If you skip back over a decade, you would watch a punk band, a hardcore band, and a death metal band on the same night at the same venue, and it was a 3-band lineup. And then suddenly we had shows starting at 5 p.m. every Friday night, 7 bands, all death metal, all the same genre. And yeah, it just became very stagnant, I think is the correct word for that. So yeah, just seeing people experiment and push events in a different direction has been great.
Yeah, one of the things that I was talking about actually, like with a lot of the interviews during COVID, when we're talking about like the absence of shows and all that sort of stuff, is one of my like hopes was the whole absence makes the heart grow fonder thing, and it genuinely seems that way. Even Durban is fucking dead for music, and I'm fortunate enough to be here. But there is a group of people, honestly, doing their absolute best to make it a viable music scene again, by approaching new venues, by organizing shows, organizing bands. There's a lot of new blood coming into the scene in Durban itself, and it's really, really good to see. And if Durban is having that kind of like little revival, I can only imagine what's happening in the Cape, in Joburg, and I'm all for it.
So, I mean, I won't comment on Durban because if you follow me on Facebook, you're going to know I'm disdain for Durban. So let's leave Durban out the picture. But I think you're 100% right. So in terms of the new blood side up in Joburg, I don't know from a promoter point of view or organizer point of view if I've seen a lot of new blood. But I've definitely seen a lot of innovative ideas and a lot of change in direction and change in tact, which has been great. I think Durban has its own issues in that it really is building almost from ground zero once again. And quite frankly, I think that's exciting. I mean, I've even said to people, I miss the days of where you would go to a show in a car park, like you pay $20, you bring your own booze and you do whatever you do. And you have bands playing at a skate park or in the car park or something like that. So even hearing that Durban's actually getting back on the radar is great. But I mean, there is no reason or no valid excuse for bands to say that things don't exist. The bands that are pushing the envelope are the ones that are making things happen, and they're doing things in a different way. There's no reason that you have to be limited by a lack of venues. And as you just expressed, I mean, is new blood coming in Durban there. They're approaching different venues because obviously all the old ones have closed down, and they're trying to resurrect the scene. And it takes one good venue to start getting an area up on its feet again. That's really all it takes, and 1,000 other things. But yeah.
And I agree with you with the whole thing of just shows happening wherever, just making do with what you've got. I think like too many of the people who did those kind of things left too quickly or stopped doing it, and there was no one who really took up after them. It kind of just dwindled out.
Yes and no, dude. I think partially they got old. That's the one side of it. Is even when I look at the bands that are coming out nowadays, they do feel few and far between. Maybe you watch things through rose-tinted glasses when you look at the past, but I haven't seen a lot of new bands coming out the gate that are ready to step up and be on the same platform or worship with the same reverence as bands like 16 Stitch were, The Narrow, who are, still going 20 years later, Pestroy, etc. Those are huge alternative household names in the alternative circuit. And they haven't really been challenged since, there aren't any bands that have really pushed the envelope to say, I want to take that mantle. I want to be remembered as one of the big four bands, or like one of the four Police artists or the Strafverkenners or whatever you want to refer to it as. I don't know. Maybe, like I said, it's the rose into glasses. Maybe it's getting a bit older and not seeing what the younger bands are doing in the smaller venues that I'm not at. So it could be a whole culmination of things, but I don't feel like I've seen a mass inflow of new bands over the past couple of years that have become staples, apart from one or two, like on a lineup where you expect to see that band. I think Sunken State, Riddle Break are probably the only two examples I could give that have come out less than a half decade ago and really pushed the envelope and ended up as staples and playing things like Ramfest, etc.
I honestly, like the way that you phrased it, like I have never looked at it that way. I've actually never, as a musician myself, I've never looked at it like I want to be that, like I want to be good, don't get me wrong, but I've never looked at it in terms of, hey, I want to be one of those staple bands that. And if I'm looking at it that way, I don't know, like there's a lot of younger guys who are coming into the scene who don't even know any local bands. They've just picked up an instrument and have decided to start playing, and they know nothing about the South African music scene or the history of it or any of the bands part of it, maybe one or two that they've seen locally, but none of those ones that are sort of like iconic within the scene, especially with the older guys.
Yeah, dude, 100%. 100%. Watching The Narrow was I'm only 31. I turned 32 this year, but it made me feel exceptionally old because the crowd was filled with younger kids, and then obviously the old buddies that were there to watch The Narrow because they've been following The Narrow for 20 years. Excuse me. And you'd hear a lot of the kids say, "I've never seen The Narrow," or "I know one song and it's Lonely Lonely," and I'd be like, "Wait, what? How are you?" And how do you consider yourself an integral part of the South African music scene, and that's all you know? It's bizarre. Even looking ahead later this month, Fokop's doing their 19th birthday show. And if you consider the fact that it's an 18-plus show, I believe, there are going to be kids in attendance that are younger than the band's collective age, or the band's longevity, which is staggering as well. And these are still the bands that were big then, they're big now. And I don't see anyone pushing and really trying to take that mantle and say, okay, thank you for your service. We've got it from here. We're going to carry the torch. I don't see that. Obviously, there are a few bands. I'm not going to single any out because then the others will be like, oh, so you don't consider us that. There are a handful that are trying, obviously, but I don't think that's the incentive of a lot of bands. And the other thing that I feel that's been lost, and maybe I was just too happy being a 13, 14-year-old kid watching shows, was the reverence that people had for bands. Even though they were local, they were like heroes. They were on stage. They were so cool, like you wanted their autograph. You wanted 16 Stitch to sign your shit. And yeah, people still want the Narrow to sign stuff. People still want Folkroff to sign stuff. But I don't see people doing that with bands playing at let's say, Rumors or the Sonage, you know. So I wonder where part of that ideal fell away. I don't know if it's because the world became more open, the internet. I feel like that has some play into it, where international bands are more accessible to you. You can tweet them, you can like their stories, you get a sneak peek behind their lives, and lift the curtain, so to speak. Whereas back when we were growing up, we had MySpace eventually, and even that wasn't super close to being in with the band that you idolized that was abroad. So the next best thing was to idolize the band you had available to you within your own country. So I think the internet stripped a lot of that away.
I generally like what you're saying is like what I generally refer to this as like kind of like a power vacuum that was left by these big bands that came before, and no one has really stepped up to the plate. Like you said, there's guys trying, there's guys definitely making a solid effort of it. At the same time, like you said, there's no one that's looking at them with that sort of reverence, and I think that also just comes down to like a lot of the culture around live music within our scene. Like it seems to be sort of evolving now, but there was never really that thing of I'm just going to go to a venue to go watch some bands for the sake of watching some bands. I just want to go and watch some live music. It's a case of I'm going to go watch either a band I know or a band that consists of people that I know. And it was never about the thing of going to discover new music. There was that I found that might be also like a sort of an integral part of it, because if you're going to that with the thing of I want to hear live music and having your expectations met and exceeded, that's where that sort of like reverence and that sort of thing would also come from.
Yeah, I suppose. And you know, lumping myself into that boat when I was that age and I was just going to shows, it didn't really matter who was on stage. I wanted to go and be part of this whole new world that was opened up to me since my parents let me leave the house, you know, or drop me off. So that's how I got exposed to a lot of the stuff. But again, I draw myself back to the internet. You see a new band announce stuff. You know what, I can stream a single before I go watch them. I decide already I'm not interested. They might be electrifying live, and I might never know, purely because I've just only listened to one single, and that's all I've done.
It's so easy to dismiss.
It is. It really is. And also, if you, scroll through your Facebook feed, and you're friends with a lot of musicians, everyone's got big things coming. Everyone's dropping a single. Everyone's doing it. It's hard to keep up or hard to care eventually as well. Unless you know the people in the band or it's a band you really, really like. And that's where I think that line gets very blurry and very difficult to overcome. So again, that comes down to how do you push the envelope to make sure people take notice of you?
No, 100%. I get where I think it's definitely a solid line of reason. I think for me, like the first band that I ever held with that kind of like with what you're explaining, you're one of the few people who I've spoken to who might actually remember Burning Blue.
Oh yeah, Ryan's on tour with the Narrow right now.
Oh shit! What?
Yeah, dude, he's filling in drums for the Narrow on the whole tour.
It's like that was one of the. I remember being introduced to the music scene. Was my first band, and we went to Rumors Lounge when it was still in Veltevreden, and to just go look at the venue that we were going to inevitably be playing at, and Burning Blue just happened to be there playing an open mic because they hadn't played in a while, and my mind was absolutely blown. Like I went to as many shows as I could, and because I wanted to just have that level, and while they never hit like like a massive success, they were heroes to me. Like the way that you've been explaining, I still to this day, the memories of watching that band and just how kind they were and the kind of people that they were, just still has inspired me to this day as a musician.
Yeah, but that's precisely it, right? And I think that's exactly what I'm trying to allude to. So yeah, different time period altogether, but yet you've nailed it. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And I don't know, I just don't get the impression that there's a lot of new blood that's coming in, seeing things through those eyes. And I partially blame the audience, and I'm trying to word this as carefully as possible. I think we all got spoiled pre-COVID. There used to be festivals, full-day festivals, and I mean, there's are still now, but Seasons Wither was a huge thing, and there were no international acts. It was headlined by local acts. And that, Opi Kopi was quite similar. And then eventually it became, oh, you don't have an international, or oh, you only have one international. I'm not interested in going to your festival. How can you justify that price for one international? And I think the audience got greedy and started overlooking the local aspect of it. And it was only about what internationals on the bill, and the rest of the bands were there, just there to fill time.
I get it. I understand exactly what you're trying to say. It's that overlook of the South African musicians are actually, like, they're fucking talented. They're really good at what they do, and they have to put in a lot of work to get any form of recognition, and that would completely, like, sputter out any momentum that a festival would have, because, like you're saying, that people would just not be willing to go because they're not going to get to see an international artist.
Yeah, and that's particularly coming from the youth. Again, the older guard, I mean, do go for, they're like, oh, it's a solid local lineup. I don't even care about the headliner. Let's go. But I think the youth has a different problem in that respect. And I stand to be corrected. I mean, obviously, I can't speak for the youth. I'm not part of them in that sense. But that's just my perception of it. And then just regarding the talent in this country, I'm sure it was Gareth Wilson that posted about it the other day from Opi Kopi days. And I agreed with him to the point that I wish people would stop comparing South African artists to international artists, because they're not the same. Our artists are unique in their own way. So why hold them to what is an international standard? They're brilliant by their own standard. You look at groups like BCUC, you can't tell me they're on an international level because they're so unique. They're perfectly amazing at what they do, and we have so many bands that are exactly that. They might never break the international mainstream because they are decidedly South African, and those types of bands do exist. But we need to stop saying, oh, we're up to international level. No, we're up to our own level, which is world-class in and of itself. We don't have to compare ourselves to validate us.
But isn't that what live music is? That unique experience, that's what it is, and people are missing out on that.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, how often do you walk away from watching a new band and some people go like, oh my God, that's international quality? You must have heard that statement.
It's actually, yes, now that you mention it, yes.
Exactly. But why? Why does it have to be international quality? Are we inherently starting with that mindset? If you follow that train of thought, it sounds to me like the assumption is, oh, it's South African, ergo it won't be as good. Oh, this band is good, now it's actually up to international standard. No, that's the wrong way of looking at this completely. We set our own standard.
It's like it's a mindset that needs to change. It's like, okay, yeah. I fully get you.
Yeah, it's like that whole Locals Lacquer campaign that they had years ago. And again, I didn't like it. It was, don't just support something because it's local. Support something because it's good and it happens to be local. Just supporting something for the sake of being local is not reason enough, I don't think. And that's how you weed out the bands that are truly great and could go which way they choose, versus the bands that are going to be around for a short time but potentially a good time. Yeah, I don't know. I'm going off on some weird tangents today, but yeah, dude, I don't know if all of this is coming across as coherent. Because again, I was more prepped to talk about photography. Yeah, so no, dude, no. By all means, carry on with your line of questioning. It's an interesting one.
This is the thing about about what sludge is, though. It ends up being a conversation, and nothing is scripted. Nothing is it's not like a set line of questions. It's wherever the answers go, that's where the conversation ends up going, and you end up learning really interesting things about artists, and that's the whole point of sludge, is to learn more about artists and who they are and what it is they do. You get if you get a better understanding for the people behind the music, you may just be more inclined to listen to the music.
No, absolutely. So I mean, I understand sludge from that aspect, but working more on the photojournalist side, yeah, it's a different thing. I don't have music to promote. I don't have a deep dark secret behind a photo I took. No, it's a photo I took of an artist, So yeah, chatting about the scene is obviously something we can definitely do, but you're not going to learn any special behind the scenes. Oh, let's inside the mind of Wayde about how he photographs Francois. Like there's no science to it. Band plays, I take photos. That's the job.
But that, actually, moving on to photography, I saw that you were featured with Fujifilm. There was tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, so I mean, I was chatting to the guys, and I'm good friends with a couple of the current Fuji ambassadors, and I shoot alongside one of them, who Andre Badenhorst. He does a lot of Francois Van Koch's promotion type shoots, and then one of the others being Snake from Focus. So yeah, they just introduced me to the Fuji team, and they took a look at my work, and they're like, "Yeah, this is really cool. Can we ask you some questions about it?" So it's a series they do. Take 10 with a particular photographer. So yeah, I sent them through what I consider my favorite images that I've taken since I moved from Nikon over to Fuji at the end of 2019. And yeah, the Fuji system's just blown my mind. So yeah, I was incredibly honored to have them taking interest at that level. So yeah, no, it was really cool, and definitely a feather I'm glad to have in my cap.
What prompted the change, moving over from like the camera brands? Was it just something that was you were interested in that change, or?
So I mean, Henry made the change a long time before I did, but comparing the sizes of the cameras, so my initial justification for it was I just want something smaller, that I can carry around more often, take when I travel, do whatever. And then obviously COVID happened, so I didn't use it all that much. And then shows came back, and I was like, I've got this new 3G, and it's only got a kit lens. I don't have any of my typical high-end lenses that I bought for my Nikon cameras and all of that. But I'm going to go shoot the Focus show, Designer Focus Unplugged. I'll take the Fuji with me. I'll just try it out, see what it's like. And dude, literally after 2 or 3 shots with that, I was like, no, packing the Nikon away. I'll shoot the rest of this concert on a kit lens. I'm done with Nikon. And I was pretty much sold. So yeah, since then I just converted everything over, and now, yeah, fully Fuji. There's just no looking back. There's just something about the system that if you're a photographer, I mean, you just get in your hands, and it's so simple yet so complicated. And it really just makes you feel in charge of your photography, but at the same time that you really have to know what you're doing, and yet it's easily accessible. I don't know how they sound like polar opposites, but it's that simple and it's that complicated.
Like it's funny it's funny to say this, because how much, like, roughly, like, you've obviously since gone and got more gear for the Fuji, and
Mm-hmm.
I shudder to think at what that has cost you.
We don't have to throw prices out there, right? No. Okay, I'll give you some context. I bought a new lens the other day, and that was 30.
Good
So
God.
yeah, and that's not even on the wait, that's probably one of the pricier ones I've had to buy. But yeah, they all fall within the region of 25 to 30 new. And yeah, there's let's just say there's enough lenses around here. Because my wife listens to this podcast, I don't want her to know how much it's I mean, the worst part was no, of course. I mean, and the worst part is I shot the Focus show, and then I was like, great. So now I have one Fuji camera. I need another one because I like to shoot shows with 2 cameras. So literally a week after that, I bought a second camera. So yeah, when the bug bites, it bites hard.
So the reasoning for using 2 cameras, is that like a dynamic thing, or is that like a difference between the cameras, or is that what sort of prompts you using 2 different cameras?
2 different lenses, typically.
Oh, okay, so you don't have to swap lenses like
exactly.
Halfway. Okay, I get it.
That's it. So it helps you capture moments a lot faster, right? I mean, artists move around a lot; they move fast. So you're using something that's a bit wider. The guy's at the front of the stage. Next thing, he's run off to the other side of the stage, inaccessible to you. You whip your camera with the longer lens on, you still get the shot. There's no time for switching over, especially if it's a moment you're trying to capture.
That definitely makes a lot of sense. Like my fiance quite recently got a. She's always wanted to do photography, and she was always interested in it. And she could never really get a camera, and I managed to get her a DSLR. Not like a high end, just second. And she's slowly but surely been getting into photography, and because I am part of the music scene, I've been wanting to take her to practice, essentially, to go through to shows and try and just photograph the people, just the environment, the bands, the artists. And so for someone like her, like, who's wanting to take that dive, who has a camera but is too nervous to get involved, what kind of advice would you give to that person?
Well, I mean, I feel like if I was speaking to that person one-on-one, so I mean, it's hard to give advice about the nerves. But my question would want to be around, why are you nervous? What is making you nervous about doing it, right? And I mean, do you have an answer on your girlfriend's behalf? What is she nervous about?
I think her biggest fear is breaking it.
Okay, so buy a strap and then put it over your shoulder. You can't drop it next. That's what I'm saying. Like, you don't want to drop your guitar, but dude, straps exist for a reason. That's how you don't drop it. Also, insure your camera. If it drops, you get a new one. Next.
Shit, that's it. I didn't even consider that.
Yeah, no, it's a serious thing. Depending on how much you paid. I mean, I have some cameras here that are ancient, and they'll probably sell on the second-hand market for $3,000. Obviously, I'm not going to pay a monthly insurance premium on those, but the high-end stuff is insured. It has to be. You can't afford to have it stolen. If you drop it, you're in shit. You need to have that stuff insured. That mitigates the nerves, right? So, okay, I mean, that was your first point about being nervous, dropping it or damaging it. Get a strap, get insurance. What else?
Being in the way of the artist.
Unless you're on stage, you can't be. Next.
I think those were the three main concerns, and just summed it, like, nailed it out so perfectly.
but that's how simple it is, right? I mean, yeah, it gets so overly hyped up as to, okay, I mean, from a photography and a technical side, it's probably one of the most difficult, and I will always argue, forms of photography that you can engage in. You have zero control over the object, you have zero control over the light, you have zero control over anything. So you have to know your camera like the back of your hand. You have to be able to adjust your settings on the fly, know what will work, know what won't work for the particular venue that you're at. So in terms of the technical aspect, yeah, it can be a bit nervy about trying to get things right, especially if you've been hired to do so. Then there's added pressure of, okay, don't fuck it up. So that would be one area that I understand where nerves could creep in. But for someone starting out, no, take your camera to a show, right? Don't get on stage, because honestly, 99% of photographers, when they're learning, should not be on stage. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to avoid, firstly, the band members, all the different jacks, all the different sets of equipment that are on stage. And secondly, they also don't know what to do with their camera when they're on stage. How do you make the back of an artist look good? Because that's essentially what you're going to be photographing if you're on stage, right? So what story are you trying to tell with that photo? I'm guilty of it. I've done it at smaller venues where I've crawled to the back of the stage and grabbed the photo of the artist, and I'm like, this is absolutely pointless. There's nothing I can do with this photo. Why am I here? Bigger stages, obviously a lot easier to crawl around the stage, shoot from the side, get the crowd in. But by the same token, until you've established yourself or built up a portfolio, you aren't going to be getting on those stages. Security, you're not going to have the clearance for it. So there's minimal to be scared of. And unlike things like being a musician, when you get up on stage, if you fail on the night, you can actively embarrass yourself. As an aspiring photographer, if you don't get good shots that night, don't post them. It's really that simple. Learn from your mistakes and then take shots the next weekend. There's no need to feel nervous. There's no need to feel embarrassed. Sure, dealing with people in the crowd can be a bit nervy, and I still don't like doing it at particular shows. I mean, if there's too much brandy involved, I do get a bit nervous about standing in front of the 7 tall Afrikaans man has been drinking brandy since 11 a.m. and it's now 9 o'clock. So yeah, that's the type of thing I would like to avoid, which then, unless there's a photography, but I would rather try and climb on stage. But again, I've been hired by a band to do that, therefore they expect me or know I'm going to be on stage, so they know to look out for me, right? And I think that's also one of the crucial elements is the bands need to be aware that you may be on stage at some point. So A, you don't interfere with their performance, and B, you don't get hurt yourself as the photographer. I mean, if you're not seeing, if you take, I know I speak about football a lot, but I shoot them a lot. The way Wayne moves on stage, between his kicking, his jumping, and the swinging of his face, if you're in the wrong spot at the wrong time, you're getting stitches in your head. It's going to happen. So unless he knows to look out for you and vice versa, you're going to have a horrible time. But yeah, I don't. No, I've only been hit by my cables repeatedly. I even have photos of Gallows playing a few weeks ago, where literally I shot in burst mode and I could see the mic cable making like a sine wave rhythm towards my lens and then just smacking me through the face. Regan still hasn't apologized properly for that. I'm still very upset with him.
Have you seen any other photographers be taken out?
Dude, not seriously. Not by instruments, but again, most of the guys that are on stage do know what they're doing, so they actively try and avoid getting taken out. But it can happen. I mean, it's not impervious to it. I wasn't at the show with Henry, but I know he got stitches in his head because laying on stage collided with his head. So that comment about a bass coming for you was specific for a reason, and now it sounds like I live next to a drag racing track. But yeah, he got proper, he got staples in his head.
My God.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. So in terms of a new photographer, I mean, the first cardinal rule, anytime someone comes to me and they ask, so how do I become a band photographer or shoot live music? There's two critical components to start this off with. One, don't be a dick. And I think that pretty much covers any role you want to play in the music industry. If you're a dick, you're going to go absolutely nowhere. You won't be invited back in any capacity. It's pretty much a cover-all statement. Secondly, practice. I mean, if you want to do it, you've got to go put in the hours. I don't care how good you are in a studio. I don't care how good you are at doing any other form of photography. This is a different environment completely. You are going to be out of your depth for a while. I mean, an experienced photographer will probably figure it out a lot sooner, don't get me wrong. But if you're new to photography as a whole and this is the only thing you want to focus on, prepare to suck for a while. And that's okay. I look back at some of my old stuff and I cringe, but in a good way, because it shows that there's been growth and that the practice has paid off, you know? So that would be my advice. And again, the nerves are irrelevant. If you don't want to damage stuff, firstly, cameras are more resilient than you think. Secondly, if you're insured and strapped to you, the odds of it breaking, I've yet to drop a camera or a lens, and I'm touching wood now just in case, because I don't want to do that tomorrow then. And thirdly, if the shoots really don't work out, just don't post them. You can't embarrass yourself by not putting something out there.
That's very, very true. I think those words will help her a lot, because she's actually quite like a frank person as well. So just how easily you've put it out there, that'll and I think for anyone really who's interested in doing photography for that type of photography, it'll help a lot.
Yeah, I mean, the best advice is to dive right in. And I mean, there's 100 different rules that go along with photography, and depending on the venue that you're at and depending who you're shooting, everyone has their own sets of rules. But my biggest piece of advice is, you know what, the local shows we shoot, the smaller venues, don't always have the greatest lights. So get a flash unit, you know, stick that on your camera, make sure you're getting an extra bit of light. Please do not focus it at the artist and flash them in the eyes. They will murder you. But bounce the flash off the ceiling. So shoot the flash vertically up, gives you some extra light, lights up the venue, and you'll have photos that are usable, most likely. Obviously, this is going to depend on the rest of your settings, but I'm not going to get that technically specific right now. But that's another area that really opens the floodgates a lot faster. If you're shooting an international, flash is never allowed. But again, if you're shooting an international band, they've got a huge stage setup. They've got massive lights. Your flash is not going to make any world of difference on stage that size.
That makes sense. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I've personally been flashed in the eyes before, and yeah, it was not a fun experience.
Yeah, no, it's not. I mean, I've done it to myself. Going back to when we like to consider ourselves intelligent or not, this is where I know I'm not at times, because I've definitely checked to see if my flash is working by looking at it and triggering it instead of pointing it at something. Yeah. Blinding, I don't think is even the right term. It's like entering the fourth dimension.
It's like a fucking flash, like a flashbang.
Dude, it's insane. And I mean, it depends even what flash power you've got the thing on. But if you do it at 1-to-1, holy crap, you probably blind yourself for the next 6 hours. So yeah, don't point it at the band. Point it at the ceiling. Odds are, if you're not a complete small person that's under 2 foot, it's not going to bug anyone. It's not going to get in anyone's eyes. It's going to be fine.
No, that's a solid piece of advice.
Well, dude, it kind of helps you jumpstart a bit better as well. I mean, I've watched a lot of guys struggle for quite some time, because low light photography is difficult. And if you do have the option to use flash, use it. And people lose interest and people get upset because their shots aren't turning out the way they'd envisage them, right? And then they stack it up against someone that's used flash for that show, and they're like, oh, what am I doing wrong? Just use the flash. We all do it for local shows, for smaller shows. We all do it. And I know it's technically frowned upon, but technically venues should have better lights, but that's not the case. And more lights would just be overkill for a small venue. It's the perfect amount of light to see the band. As an attendee, you don't need more. So I understand from the venue's point. So from that point, use a flash.
No, that's definitely solid. I actually wanted to ask, who are some of your favorite local photographers? Like some of the guys that you've worked with and whose shots you always stoked to see.
Oh, dude, obviously, like I mentioned earlier on, Henry before he passed was definitely my mentor. So I was always stoked to see his work. Sean Brunt, Liam Lynch, those guys were instrumental, I feel, in setting up a lot of the early work for artists like Francois van Kook and Fokke Politicar. So they've captured a lot of images for the first time that the rest of us have ultimately recreated. But you'll never beat the first time that image was taken. Like a Francois standing on a barrier with the crowd open in front of him. That's just on another level. And then, all the other local photographers, Christelle, Alex Wolf, Chris Prazer. I look forward, even Evan Cummings now, I look forward to seeing all of the guys' work, especially the new guys, and seeing them get excited. It's great to see people that aren't dicks coming into the pit, wanting a bit of advice, and then really enjoying the journey on this. There's no better sense of joy than watching someone else succeed in that. So as you may pick up, I don't take this as a super competitive thing. Like watching others excel, great, I'm glad you got the shot, it looks killer. Carry on. And again, I don't think it's a place for a hyper-competitive nature either. It's a small industry. Being a band photographer is not going to pay your bills. Not in this country, and I don't think in any country really. Not if you want to live a semi-suitable lifestyle anyway. So why be competitive? Just get along with everyone. You get to see your mates, become friends with the guys in the pit, guys and girls in the pit. So yeah, dude. I think that's my answer. I can't actually remember what the question was. Whose work am I excited to see? I think, I listed everyone.
You did answer the question. Yes, that's fine. You got carried away,
and then
but you answered it.
I went off on a tangent again. But yeah, I did answer it. There we go. Cool. Got it.
And then, obviously another, being, a local band photographer, the obvious question is, who are some of your favorite local bands to shoot?
Dude, anyone that's super high energy, right? I love catching movement, so I don't think anyone that knows me will find this surprising. Fuck Off is my favorite band to shoot. between Vaynant and Francois, there's so much movement going on that you are perpetually trying to grab someone jumping or spitting the water or running around swinging a mic cable doing something. And then obviously bands like Facing the Gallows as well. I mean, high intensity. So any band that really brings out a lot of energy, even Sunken States, yeah, I can't believe that slipped my mind. I mean, the way Dwayne does his spread eagle jumps, I have no idea how he does that. But just trying to get those in frame, and just anyone that brings me that high intensity, I'm always happy to shoot. I'm happy to shoot most bands, but there is a limit, and I think the artists understand it too, that if you're a band that's perpetually glued to your mic stand or doesn't move, there's only so much I can shoot. You know, before it just looks like the same moment taken over and over again. Because while the songs change, the photograph doesn't relay the music itself. So you might be playing a different chord, but you're still just staring at the neck of your guitar. And there's only so many images I can post like that.
No, that's completely understandable, because like you said, there's no music to convey, there's no sound to convey. It's a captured moment. I can get that entirely.
Correct. So I mean, if you have a guitarist jumping, then you get then it somewhat conveys that, okay, whatever they are playing is obviously high intensity enough. I mean, you're seldom going to see someone jumping as high as they can during a ballad. So it's obviously something with a bit of frenetic energy behind it. But if you are strapped to a microphone, again, I'll do my best and get as different angles, different close-ups, wide shots, whatever. But there is eventually a limit to what I can do to make you look interesting, just in terms of photos.
That's like, I think that's also like a solid piece of advice to artists wanting to market themselves, because those live performance photographs, if someone looks at it and sees, wow, it's just four dudes just standing there, that doesn't look really entertaining. And it's going back to like the whole thing of dismissing an artist before you've even seen them live. Their music could be amazing, but because of your perception of that photograph, you're like, well, this looks like all these photographs of the same four dudes standing in the same four positions. Like, why? That doesn't seem like a fun time.
No, and I think you're right. I mean, again, that would be a serious misjudgment on a lot of people's parts, because I mean, maybe the music is so technical, there's no room for anyone to move. I mean, they just don't have that capacity because they are so honed in on what they're doing. But again, though, if you were to contrast that with, let's take Facing the Gallows as an example, the minute Regan leaps over a barrier into the crowd, to mosh with the crowd while doing vocals, that photo is unmistakable. You can see there's a vocalist in a pit running and moshing with people. It's obviously a band with energy. It might be a band you want to see live just due to that fact. Whereas if Regan were just doing his vocals with a mic stand, and that's all he did, it's going to be a lot harder to convey what he's doing in that sense. So, yeah, if you have the capacity to move, and I mean, I'm not saying everyone needs to become coked up and run around like idiots. I mean, that's hardly what I'm saying. But a bit of movement, like cross the stage, stand next to have the guitarist strut across and go stand next to the bassist. So now I've got two of you in one shot. It looks like something interesting. But if you're all glued to your assigned spaces, it becomes very difficult to tell a story or make you look. It's up to you how you want to be perceived through a series of photos. And I'm not, when it comes to photography, I mean, there's 100 different types of styles. I like to think of myself as more photojournalistic, where I'll edit the lighting a bit, but I'm not going to do any serious Photoshop on it. I'm not going to do any serious wizardry. So pretty much what the crowd sees is what I'm trying to capture. So if that's what you did for the whole show, that's what I'm taking photos of.
And it just comes down to like have at least a bit of charisma. Like,
yeah,
that's the simplest aspect of it. Like you said, you don't have to run around like you've just like Usain Bolt and half a gram of crack. You need to just fucking just to do something interesting.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, and even if you're a smaller band, right, that's trying to get into the bigger shows or better time slot, whatever you want to call it, if there's a photographer in front of you, there's nothing wrong with a bit of interaction either. You can look at the photographer. You can give a horn, give them a middle finger, do whatever the hell you want. I don't care. Again, it's just something extra that the photographer has in their arsenal to take a photo of, go home, and then that charisma shines through. Again, now it sounds like I'm a Facing the Gallows fanboy, but I don't think I've shot the Facing the Gallows show where I have not gotten Ray to give me the middle finger. And conversely, I've not shot a single Francois show where Richard, the guitarist, has not given me the middle finger, and I've bought a photo of them. That's almost like on my shot list now. If I don't get that, then I didn't succeed for the night. Those are photos I have to get because I know they're going to give me the finger at some point.
It's like the mission accomplished signal for the
Yeah, pretty much. Either that or they're really telling me to piss off. And I mean, it could be both because I made Gallows mess up a song once and I've made Richard mess up a song before as well. So just by my presence. So maybe that's the reason for it.
Wait, now I hope I'm not confused. The Brandon Render being the child.
Dude, there's nothing to tell. I mean, he's 12, right? I mean, literally, the kid is 12 as far as I'm concerned. But then again, I was showing to my wife the other day, I started seeing anyone under the age of like 25 that's 12 years old. So he does fit the mold for being 12. Yeah, and I think it was just funny because when he came onto the scene, he was like super hyped on everything. And like, yeah, so it was fun to tease him about being like the energetic 12-year-old that was just like wanting to be a groupie, especially for Facing the Gallows. So yeah, it's just not going to go away. It's just become a staple. I don't care if the dude turns 100. I'm still going to refer to him as 12. maybe when he dyes his hair a normal color, then we can stop calling him 12 and bump his age up to 13.
Just small steps, baby steps.
Yeah, baby steps, because that's all he's capable of. Again, because he's 12. But yeah, no, with maturity comes age and wisdom, or with age comes maturity and wisdom. In Brandon's case, I think all three might happen one day, but we'll get there. Again, like you said, baby steps.
Hopefully.
Well, I mean, if it doesn't, I really don't care. I mean, drop the kid off at kindergarten for the rest of his life. Let him spend extra time in grade 4. I don't know. I don't know how he spends his day, but yeah, I mean, it's up to him. And yeah, it's clearly a parenting issue. I mean, I just look at that child and he's out at 11 o'clock at night, and I can't help but think, doesn't your mom wonder where you are? Like, surely children should be home for this time of night. But clearly, it's just lack of awareness. They just don't care where their 12-year-old is.
The parents these days.
Parents these days, man. That's why I'm glad to see he's in a band and they play like the first slot, as it should be, so he can get home at a respectable hour. He can't be playing the headlining slot. He'll never be allowed to. Like,
gotta hit that
bedtime. He's gonna get home after. Yeah, exactly. I'm sorry, if once carte blanche is over, you go to bed. No. These children nowadays, I'm telling you, they're just out of control, man.
Right, I've had an absolute blast chatting to you about photography, about the music scene. On that note,
on the note of Brandon Render, fucking hell.
My dude, I've had such a blast chatting to you. I hope you have a fantastic weekend further. Good luck with the in-laws.
No, dude, good luck with the rugby is more the thing, man. Shit. And yeah, this has been an absolute blast. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no stress at all, man. I hope you have a fantastic weekend.